We're live. Is
Good
that
afternoon,
exciting?
Mike. Hey, every Friday I get to end my day with Mike Brooks. What could be more exciting than that?
I can't think of anything else. It's cool because I got the monitor over here now. I feel like, and I see it pop up when we go live, which is cool, which is how I know we didn't go live while we were in the green room making fun of our coworkers.
Yeah, I'm always worried because, we have our pre-call banter. I'm always worried that you're broadcasting that. So,
Making inappropriate jokes. So anyway, here's what I'm going to do, because we always record our podcast live on this. So I'm going to do my intro for the podcast. I always kick off with the intro. I figured I'll go live. We'll let this warm up a little bit. People jump on. And then I'll do the intro when we're going to start. So we can do a little pre-show banter.
Let's go.
So we're bantering. Tristan is here. Says, well done for the webinar. It was good and clear. Thank you, Tristan. So Tristan must have been on the webinar, which is the data webinar. Awesome.
Yeah, which that's good banter. So we wrapped up our third of 3 webinars with Datto over the course of 6 weeks. It was awesome having them host that for us. Again, our mission and Datto's mission is really trying to get audit in the hands of more MSPs to help them sell. And so we're very appreciative of our relationship with them, and I'm glad to see we got some good feedback on the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say that this is recording for the Elevating IT podcast. So if you are not a listener of the podcast, what are you waiting for? Go to iTunes, subscribe to it on iTunes. It's not on any of the others just yet, but it's on iTunes, and we would love for you to review it. We'd love to get your feedback. Give us those 5 stars on iTunes, a rating and review. Let us know what you think. I always do this in post, Frank, so I don't even know if you've ever heard the intro. Like, I feel like there should be an intro to our live.
Is there music and stuff? Do we have
There
is, really? Okay.
There is.
I'll have to check it out.
Well, here's the thing. So, I launched this podcast, and I would love everybody else's feedback on this too. I launched the podcast, and when I first launched it, I did a little music, and then I did an intro where I read the intro, right? And it was kind of what the mission was of Elevating IT, and it goes back to our mission as audit. What we were trying to do, we were trying to elevate the quality of IT available to the SMB. So it was really focused on that, and I read that, right? And then my friends over at Creative Radio, I forget the name of their site, but I tune into their stuff. They're this couple who does voiceover work. And they do a lot of podcast voiceovers, and they've got this huge roster of people who do stuff. And they do this thing on Friday where they actually will do requests. So you can give them about about 15-second spot where they will read your podcast, and they build a podcast intro for you or right live on their show. I thought that was really cool. So I put one in, and then if you upgrade to pay them $20, they will definitely do it, right? So it's like they may get to yours, but if you pay, you go to the top. So I paid $20, and they did an intro, and I use it as our intro. So now you've got the new one. It's very professional.
Let me tell you my first experience on a podcast. So yeah, as you know, I always kind of poke fun at you for doing podcasts. Never really saw.
Now, in fairness, you poke fun at me for a lot of things.
That's true. You're a good target, and it's easy. You got a lot of good material. You provide that for me, so I do appreciate that opportunity to poke fun at you. Let's talk specifically about podcasts. So one of our other partners, he's a big podcaster, and about 3-4 years ago, I got invited to be on a podcast with Michael Michalowicz. He's a New Jersey author, books like The Pumpkin Plan, Profit First, just really, really smart guy, really cool guy too.
Got one of his books somewhere.
Yeah, and I've seen him speak a bunch of times, and just really nice guy. So get on, scheduled to be on the podcast, and we're going to talk about using Profit First in audit. And they thought it was particularly cool because back then we were a startup, and they wanted to kind of understand like why we would do this and how we set it up. So it turns out that Michael's podcast engineer is very good friends with one of our partners in audit. So our partner in audit, he now is going to get on the podcast because, he knows how this stuff works. So I was like, yeah, this sounds great. So I go to his office, and he's got like a studio. So, I always notice, apparently we don't do this, but a lot of people have like the microphones and that little spit thing that you talk, like very headphones. Oh, yeah. So here we are, and we're getting ready to do this, and they sit me at the end of the console and give me like this broken sort of like set of headphones, like with the curly, everything's all tangled. And like my setup is clearly like not I get all like the used crap, right? So they're like on and talking already, and Michael Michaelis is hilarious. So they're bantering like just like a great, and I'm like the idiot, like who brought this guy? Like I got like the things backwards.
Have your headphones on, like with one
hear me, and they're like, Frank, are you there? And so like I acted like I was like the shill, like make fun of me. And so, of course, my original experience was like, this is ridiculous, right? So, and then afterwards, I go, you guys set me up for failure on that. And they were laughing like, yeah, we kind of did. However, 3 or 4 years later, I got back on to do a follow-up with Michael on his podcast. And this, I was by myself. I was much more prepared. Now I'm more of a believer in the format, which is why we're here. But yeah, my first experience was like, it was kind of like when I first went skiing. And nobody told me, like, don't wear jeans and a down puffy coat when it rains and it gets wet. You weigh 300 pounds. And, so anyway, I'm much.
I can just see you with the headphones, like on, one on your face, one on the back of your head. How do I do this?
It was terrible. I actually bought a microphone because you guys had convinced me at one time, it was years ago, that I had this big giant like silver mic. I looked like I was like on like 1950s radio, this big thing, and I had this fit guard. Yeah, now that looks kind of normal. Mine was I'll have to dig it out. It's in my shelf somewhere. But
when I first got in, I've been doing podcasts like on and off since back when it was the early days. Like I have a tendency to jump into technology like when it starts because I just like it. I was on Facebook, I was on MySpace, anything I could get into to market. MySpace didn't work out so well, but Facebook did. But I've done a few podcasts and for a while, like when I first started doing it, I would just talk into, headset. Right, just your simple microphone. But as time went on, I'm like, I want to make this sound really great, and I went out and bought all this expensive equipment. And I think really what I've learned over the years is that the most important thing is the content. If the content is good, that's the most important part. If the content's not good, nobody's going to listen.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts.
I think Zoom has made this easier and more approachable, right? So you don't need to be so perfectly set up. I saw a funny little meme thing, and it said like when you're on a Zoom call and the one person who like doesn't say anything through the entire meeting at the end goes, "Thanks everybody," and when you hang up, bye everybody, and it's like so hilarious, right? Because it's so true. There's always somebody who said nothing for an hour who unmutes himself long enough to say goodbye and then they get off. So,
yep. Well, let's get into today's content. So, and before we do that, I have to address and apologize that we weren't on last week, and it's all Frank's fault. So I just wanted to publicly shame you. I said in the, you probably didn't read it, but I said in the teas that you're going to do jumping jacks. You're going to do 100 jumping jacks.
I thought it was
punishment.
Yeah, I got to let everybody know how much pressure I'm under, though, from you. Every Friday, I'm like, oh my God, it's almost 2 p.m. Eastern. Like, I got to make sure I'm on point. And
you've been really good.
Last week, I ran out of time. Things got in the way, and I know you were sweating it out. And I even told you I'd probably get on, and I knew I wasn't getting on. So
here's what we're going to do. All right, here's what we're going to do, because we want to be consistent, and consistency is important with anything, any content. I think, that you're on a regular schedule. And in fairness to Frank's an MSP. Frank is out there, and which is a cool thing about you for audit. You're the founder of audit, but I think the reason why people really respect audit is because it's not just something we're selling because we thought of it. Like this is something you created to use in your MSP and that you still actively use, which is a really cool thing. So whenever Frank is late, I like to get, or not, misses something like this, I like to give him a hard time. But the reality is, hey, he's got an MSP to run. And the most important thing is your clients. So the fact of the matter is he had to get to a client. But here's what we're going to do going forward. If you can't make it, I'm just going to go live and I'm going to fill in and I'm going to rock and roll. We're going to show is going to go on. So we won't miss a week again.
Sounds good. I'll try not to miss it though.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd have some fun with you. But we're talking about emotion. We've been talking about gap selling, and we've been going on about this, and we're on. And I don't even remember. I think it's 5. I think this is like step 5.
This is truth bomb number 5 in selling.
It's emotion, and we as audit talk a lot about emotion from the standpoint that you have to elicit emotion in your sales presentation. But this is different. This is this truth bomb is a little bit different. Talk about what this means, what it is, and
yeah, I mean it's cliche, and we all know it. People say, "Hey, people buy on emotion," right? But when you in our industry, especially when it comes to tech, we're so enamored, and we meaning like the members of the MSP, we're so mired and enamored in the technology that we forget and we think that gets our prospects excited. Now, your exuberance and your knowledge and your confidence accounts for something for sure, but we have to remember it's the emotion that moves them, right? So you're selling change, and it's got to be emotional. So when we created the audit report, we did this on purpose, and the best way that we came up with to inject emotion into the presentation without having to educate the prospect was the simple colors of red, yellow, and green. And what actually predated the audit report, because I had to do something in the interim, and this is really where this is my proof of concept, was I was doing summary statements, right? So initially I would say, look, I got to come up with a bottom line. It was like tweeting, right? So I said simplicity, that's there. So I would use those. And then I put something in bold one day and it stood out. And then another time I did it in red. And the prospect asked me about it before I even got there. And that's when I was like, boom, there's the emotion, right? Like they were like, what's this? We talk about it like the lean forward versus the lean back, right? In the past, I would do the presentation. They lean back, they'd get comfortable, right? Because they're gonna tune out, daydream about what they're having for dinner and when I'm gonna stop talking. Now they lean forward. Yeah. Now they would lean forward and they would be drawn in by the color. So that's the starting point of the emotion. Again, this report was built with this in mind, right? It wasn't by accident. I know people use the stoplight colors all the time, but we put this together and we tested a lot of formats to try to get it to a point where we would elicit that emotion. And that emotion is really driven off the croc brain, right? The crocodile brain is that fight or flight. That's what makes you like pull your hand away when you touch something hot and go, oh crap. You don't go, your neocortex, which is that super smart part of your brain, doesn't say, hey, I remember learning in school one day that when you touch something hot, there will be pain, which will then travel to my brain. So therefore, I must remove my hand, right? That doesn't happen. You just go, right? So when you see color in that red, it immediately activates the crocodile brain. They want to know more, and now you have an opportunity to educate and allow them to buy from you.
Yeah, so good takeaway is, like if you're out doing sales presentations and your client goes like this, prospect goes like this, it's a problem. I did that for the people who were listening to this on the podcast. When Frank was talking and said that, I leaned back for a little visual humor,
a little comic relief.
But it won't be funny on the podcast unless I tell you what it was.
We used to say the only emotion in my sales presentation prior to using audit was me being upset when they didn't buy from me. right?
Yeah.
That's where the emotion came in.
Yeah. And that's really what you want. You want to hook them in. You want to get them emotionally engaged. But more than that, even, is understanding that all change is emotional, right? We talked about that in the past couple of weeks. These are all connected, right? People buy change and
Right.
people fear change. We talked about that. We beat that up a lot, right? And why do they fear change? It's emotional, right? So it all comes down to emotion. So, just from that standpoint, it should be evidence enough that emotion is really important in the presentation, because if they're asked to change, the change is connected to emotion. So our job is to make it good emotion, right? Not bad emotion, right? Like you have to really flip it around so that the emotion is that, yes, I'm excited to make that change.
And here's what I like about emotion. Emotion never feels awkward or canned. Whereas if you're following a sales script and somebody is like, you realize they're doing the typical, like, if he says this, then and you realize they're just following a script, and it makes you want to like run for the hills. When you're presented with that report, it doesn't feel salesy. It doesn't feel scripted. It's clearly it's educating, right? Because we have to help you understand. I mean, we're talking usually the current state, and we want to anchor that current state. And if we get that color involved and the score is emotional too, right? When you see you've scored a 22 out of 100 and you've been paying your current MSP $3,000 a month, you're immediately like, what is going on here, right? Like, this is far worse than I thought. And now you want to know more, and you're receptive to what comes next, right? So that emotion starts to set you up for the next part of that selling process.
Yeah. And the thing that's great about audit, right, is not to beat that drum. Well, that's what we're here. We're here for that, right? We want you to use audit. I'm not going to be shy about that. But the idea here is that it's organic, right? It's not forced. And you said that. I'm just going to underscore that. Is that that's so important. Like, you can't force emotion. And when people take that step and they want to know more, they become engaged with it. When the emotion pulls them in and grabs them, they are now taking themselves on the sales journey instead of you. You know what I mean by that? It's kind of like when we're in a buying situation, being sold situation where somebody's trying to sell us something, we're apprehensive. We are looking for sales. We know we're in this situation where they're trying to sell us and we're trying to sell. It's like this adversarial type of situation. So we have, we have a foot on the brake. We're being cautious. We're looking for signs that they're trying to sell us. But then when you cross that bridge, you cross that gap, for lack of a better word, and you as the buyer are now like, oh, I get it. You start to make the narrative. You start to let that paint a picture for you, and you start telling the story yourself of how you want to now take ownership of that thing. Different conversation.
Yeah. Some of the best sales are made because you've been educated, and as they are educating you and asking the questions and doing the discovery, you are coming to the conclusion yourself what you should do, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. Like, I just yesterday, they just replaced my my HVAC system, right? 2 zones. So they did 1 zone yesterday, air conditioner and the furnace and all that good stuff. And I didn't call the HVAC guy up and say, I need to buy this, right? I didn't call him up and say, try to sell me some stuff. I called him up because I have a problem and I needed some change, right? It was a persistent issue I was having. And so they came out and they asked a series of questions. I came to the conclusion at the end of this that this would be stupid to pour thousands of dollars into a 16-year-old system that had the old Freon and wasn't high efficiency or whatever they call it. I came to the conclusion that I think I need to buy some change. And then they presented me the option, and I said yes, and that's where we got to this. So emotional only because I realized I had the problem. They helped me clarify what the issues were. And then, I was like, this is what I could have. But it was emotional because of the future state, right? So sometimes it's not only the current state, like, wow, this sucks, it's all red, but it's the future state, right? He explained to me, he's like, oh, number one, this is way more efficient than what you've had, right? You got to see the size of the new air conditioner. My old one's like this little box. The new one looks like it's like another house on the side of my house. I guess it's like bigger, it's efficient. It uses a different kind of Freon. It has different stages. So like instead of the air conditioner going on and off and you have these peaks and valleys in your temperature, it kind of does like this. And ultimately it's going to lead to savings and energy. So now I'm excited about this. I'm like, oh, it's going to be awesome. This is great, right? And so when I buy, I'm emotionally invested in this future state of what I'm going to have. And to me, that was worth the money that I paid for the system. So these are the reasons why you do that. I didn't feel like I was sold at all. I had a problem, and he helped me understand deeper what the problems were. I never thought about my electric bill. I just thought, well, the circuit breaker trips and, maybe it's the Svetzer valve. And then when we drilled into it, he's like, your electric bill's kind of high. I go, yeah, you're high in the summer, but I just accepted that. Yeah, the air conditioner's running. And then we started to unearth more and more of this type of stuff. And, that's what we're trying to do here with the audit process. And again, I know you say, hey, we're here to sell audit, but here's the deal. Like if I could help as an MSP, as Two River Tech, if I could help every single, small business that fit my profile in the state, country, I would, but it's practically impossible. So the next best thing that I could do is help my peers, right? Some would say your competition, but I view them as my peers. Help them follow a process that's proven to work and let them help a whole lot of those small businesses. And then we collectively, as the MSP community, are now serving the SMB, small to mid-sized businesses, and getting them the proper products and services that they need. So, that's to remind everybody of our why. That's what we're doing here. And I think we're being pretty successful. We've got some great feedback from MSPs that are using our system.
Awesome. Well, that is a great way to great place to kick off the weekend and end this podcast episode. We're talking about emotion this week, making sure that we can move people towards change and understanding that change is emotional and we need to engage them emotionally if we're going to make the sale. So next week, we'll be talking about number 6 and we'll be here again at actually 2 p.m. next week. We've adjusted the time a little bit with the podcast, the live recording to 2:30 a couple weeks when we've been doing the data webinar. There goes my camera. Can I get it back? Anyway, my camera's gone. Time to wrap up the podcast. That's not as dumb of a face that I'm frozen on as I usually freeze on.
Yeah, you usually look much worse. It's not too bad, but it's a good way to end.
It's a good way to end. So have a great weekend, Frank. Have a great weekend, everybody who's listening.
Yep.
And tune in again next week for our weekly sales wrap.
Thanks, everybody.